We're real people first. Podcasters, like, I don't know, 12?
Last.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Like, so way down the list.
We got room to improve, basically.
We don't know what we're doing,
Yeah.
and we're trying to
Yeah.
figure it out.
Yeah, so tell us what we need to know.
No, exactly. So in other words, if you want to hear a couple of people
talk about
life, hopefully be entertaining about it.
Yeah, we'll see. It's debatable.
Yeah, very debatable.
Yeah. So what's up, guys? Welcome to the Contractor Commute. Today we're going to talk about sales and winning jobs. And it's going to be Q&A and storytelling and all kinds of fun. So
right.
Will you, Ben, just open with like a story of selling a job, winning a job? Like, what's the importance in construction of selling jobs?
It's one of those things where some people are better at sales than others, right? I mean, some people are natural born, like they love selling things. I probably leaned a little bit more towards that side of things, where I like that part of it. But I know several people I've worked with, they hate that part of it, right? I mean, it's just like, I got to sell another job, and they don't like that at all. And so I think, for the story side about it, I think because I loved it so much, is before I had a product, I was selling things.
Sure.
So people are like, oh, really? That sounds awesome. And I'm like, yeah, we're going to have to sort the rest of the back end out later.
Yeah.
And so
it's like build the plane while it's flying.
Yeah,
sort of,
100%. Yeah, we're adding on pieces, half a wing, things going down. So that part about it started really helping me understand I had to have something really great to be great at sales.
Sure.
So I had to be,
you had to have
both had to match.
And confidence, right?
Yeah,
in what you're selling.
Right.
Yeah, I think one of the things that when I talk to people about sales, and I've been in sales for, I don't have like a long career in sales. But
I mean, come on, don't undersell it. A decade's pretty good.
Well, close. Yeah, I'm running on a decade, I guess.
Yeah.
But I think the first thing people think in sales is like just like a sigh. Like, I hate it. Like, most of the time, people do hate it because it's like public speaking, right? Like, we were talking about that the other day, how it's such a skill that you have to develop and learn and become a student of, just like anything, just like building homes. Like, I'm terrible at that. I don't know how to do that, right? But if I applied myself, if I became a student, if I tried to learn, all those things, then you'll eventually get better at it, and you just have to do it to actually be good.
Such a great point. Right? Yeah.
So, yeah.
It does. We don't get better by osmosis.
Right.
And sometimes we discount how much effort somebody put into being great at something. We see somebody that, to your point, you see a great craftsman that didn't just happen.
No.
He spent hours and hours really cultivating that skill and getting great at it. Same with a salesperson.
Yeah. I think isn't it 10,000 hours to become a master at something?
Is it that many?
I think that's what it is. I played volleyball in college, and it was always like, I think it was 10,000 hours to actually become an expert in something, which is a ton of time.
Yeah.
It's like, isn't that like 5 years?
That's 5 years. Yeah. Right. 5 years full time. And at that point,
you're
an expert.
So basically it's going to take 5 years to become good at it.
So Kinsey, you've been an expert for 5 years now.
So I guess I am an expert. I've been selling for 5 years.
Let me sell you. You know what I mean? Thousands of hours of selling, millions of dollars in sales.
Yeah. But you just think about.
We're honored to have you on the show.
Oh, thanks. It's fun. It's fun being here. I love connecting with contractors and like just learning about their processes, and that kind of leans into, we were talking a little bit about like the importance of a sales process a little bit. I think we've talked about that on previous episodes too. But like, why, maybe from your perspective in construction, why have a sales process, and maybe like, what does that look like when you're trying to win jobs?
Well, the last thing we really want to clutter things up with is a process when we're trying to get something done, because processes take time.
Yeah.
And so sometimes it's, I need to sell this job, and we want to do it the easiest ways possible.
Sure.
And that looks like, well, here's the services that we're going to provide for you. Here's what it should cost, and can you do it? Right? Can you pay for it?
Yeah.
And I think one of the things that I discovered over the years of building things for people is, if we didn't have a checklist, if we didn't have a process, we weren't learning anything. We were just repeating errors.
Interesting.
Because and particularly when the team scaled at all, because now I'm trying to replicate my knowledge and experience and tell other people. And if I forget one detail or forget one scenario and pass it along, or maybe one scenario was slightly similar to something else that happened to me in the past, and I can, say, I don't know about that.
Right.
So that process really, really was the only way we could scale, is by starting to define, okay, this is first. Number one, we're going to go head out and qualify our leads. Number one, I mean, should we be working for this person?
Yeah.
And a lot of times, if you didn't have that sort of process defined, you get way down the road with somebody and you realize, why are we even talking to this person?
Yeah.
They have what they
fit.
want and what we provide are totally different things.
Yeah, so then you're wasting time down the journey. Yeah.
And sometimes they can, I mean, I had one story to share here where I had a salesperson working for me, and he went to visit with a customer and said, they wanted a kitchen remodel. Okay. And we went through the whole process of what they wanted. And our process at our company, we had some processes. We didn't do it all wrong.
Well, and processes change. They evolve.
That's a good point.
So.
But part of our process was we would have if somebody wanted a kitchen remodel, there were too many moving parts. We tried to do a lot of higher end work and we wanted to make sure that we were right fit for them. And part of that was design service first. So it was, okay, let's get a design agreement in place. So he sold the design agreement, came back to the office and said, here, we got a design agreement.
Okay.
So we're working through the process. But one of the things that I didn't realize until later was he had communicated to them what a budget should look like. And to that customer, it seemed like a promise. He took that like, if you can do this for this amount of money, then you can have a design agreement.
Wow.
And now whether that happened or didn't happen, I don't know. That's the customer's perspective. But my salesperson's perspective was something different.
Sure, yeah.
But nonetheless, without having a clear checklist of let's talk to that customer about budget and make sure that there's a wide bit of space there where we can even scare them off somewhat. Just saying, oh, this is, you want a kitchen remodel. There's a big range of numbers here.
Yeah, that's a really good point. I remember in like some of my selling, just in a different field, but like the importance, people are scared to ask the question of like, what's your budget? And because they're like, nobody wants to give their budget because then they're like, oh, well, you're going to send me a bid for the top end. You got
50,000, it'll be 50,000.
Yeah, exactly. And so I think the importance with that question, even like for any job and qualifying it, is like make sure you have a thorough conversation about the budget, but don't just like say, well, what's your budget? You know what I mean? Like educate on like, hey, become the educator, I guess maybe if I had a theme to like sales, it would be instead of being a car salesman, like laying out the laundry list and doing all of the talking of like, hey, I'm good at this, and this, and it's going to cost this much. Like, yes, there's a point to having an estimate and going through the details, but selling the job is just as much about like learning the customer, building rapport with the customer. Actually, making one of the things we talk about a lot is making everybody that you're in a room with feel like smarter than you. Yeah. Like are. Basically. Right. Like make them feel like
not artificially they're the hero. We want to learn. Yeah.
But like just coming in with humility and being like, tell me about what you're like hoping to achieve with this project. Yep. Tell me about and then that gives opportunity for like educating along the way, sharing stories about, oh yeah, we had a customer, and that just proves like validation to your potential customer at that point. Because then you're just like adding in as part of their story and what they're wanting to achieve, if that makes any sense. You're adding in affirmation of like, oh, they've done this before, when you're able to just like kind of come behind some of the comments that maybe the potential customer's saying. So yeah, whenever we had that experience before, this went really well, or this actually didn't go well. And just like being honest and upfront in your sales process, if you will, or trying to win the job, whatever even if you don't call it a sales process, being the educator, being able to assess different scenarios, different options, giving the customer the authority a little bit of like, hey, at the end of the day, this is your call. Like, it's your project. I'm going to advise you on what I think is going to be great for this project or this home or, whatever that may be. But I think, and that might be like a little bit of a scattered thought, but just being the educator, I think is really, really important when it comes to it.
And it ties in so well with this scenario like the one I was sharing, where if you approach that from a standpoint of, okay, let's first, in order to help somebody learn, you have to understand where they're at. Yeah. And so when they come to you and say, well, we want to build this kitchen and a bathroom and a remodel the whole house, and we have $20,000 to work with, then that's where the educational aspect comes into there. Totally. Where you can start saying, well, in order to do that, these are the kinds of shortcuts you'd have to submit to cut. These are the things you wouldn't be able to do. Yeah. And you start really building that rapport, like you said, where you're now telling people, well, this is what things should cost. Right. This is what things are, the market rates are. Sure. And that ties in with their budget, where you don't feel like the used car salesman, what's your budget for a car? Well, I got $5,000. Well, here's $5,000. Yeah, totally. We got a piece of junk that's $5,000. Just happened to be.
Yeah, and I think if you're educating too, like in the upfront part, to your point, and you're discussing the budget, then when you get to an estimate point, then you're actually able to like dive into the details and be like, okay, where can we work together to save costs to get to where you need to be?
Yeah, I love that.
You know, like they may not, the budget may be 20,000, but it might actually be 30, you know, at the end of the day too. And if you're presenting your estimate, your proposal in a way to where it's laying out the detail, they might be like, okay, I see the value in that. But if you haven't educated, if you haven't shown value as part of the process, then you're just like, yep, it costs this much, sign on the dotted line, like, and then it's just contractual versus relationship.
This would tie in with a great podcast, which I know you want to do, on just don't just throw a number at things. Yeah. You can't be an educator when you just throw a number at things. And that's a whole nother, like, I think we just dive into that some other time. But it's like, it's so tempting to do, but that's not process. That's just, I want to get out of here as fast as I possible. And I'm an expert, so therefore it's cost this amount of money.
Yeah. Well, and what does the customer feel, right?
What they feel like, there's no way a guy could be that good.
Right. Well, and they're like, oh, well, they don't even care about my project because they can't even spend the time to like spend the time. You know what I mean? Like it's a big project. Like some people are taking out HELOCs for projects. Some people are, you know, saving up thousands and thousands of dollars to do projects. Some people are taking out loans, you know, new homes, things like that. So it's like one of the biggest purchases that people make is construction jobs. Yeah. So it's not something to take lightly from the educator side of things.
This really ties in with something we talked about before the show, was just the making sure we're selling the right product, because a lot of times we go into there, we need this job to feed our family or run a business or make a profit.
Right.
That's not why the customer approached us.
True.
And so we sell from a different perspective a lot of times than our customers are approaching us from. And that ties what you're saying, that when the customer doesn't have, they don't feel like you have the time for them. You don't have the time to understand what they want, what this dream that's personal. Like they might have been, you know, wanting to do this for 20 years and finally being like, okay, now we're going to do our dream kitchen or our house remodel. And it's personal. It's intimate, you know, whereas if you just approach it like, you know, hard numbers, it's not the kind of sales process that really feels warm and engaging to the person you're trying to sell.
Yeah, it's true. I think that to that point too, but somebody who's starting out in construction, the temptation is, yes, I can do that. Yes, I can do that. Yes, I can do that. Like just being the yes guy or gal.
I've never done that.
But like,
no, I have done that so many times.
You can do everything, you know what I mean? But like, I don't know. I think having a customer asking for, and it could even be like throughout the project too, like where change order type things come up. Like it doesn't have to just be up front, but like when you're being asked things, and I think that you've maybe mentioned this on a podcast previously too. If people are asking for things that maybe are a little bit outside of your skill set, it's going to exude even more confidence in your customer when you are like, actually, I'm not an expert in that, but I know who is. Like then you become the source of like every project.
That tells your customer a couple of things. One, it says this person is not going to make stuff up. They're going to be honest and tell me what they can do and can't do. And they're going to set the expectations correctly. And that is huge. I mean, if you approach a customer and say, you know what, I'm not your guy for that. They say, wow, this guy is actually humble enough and honest enough to turn down work because he's looking out for me and wants a good job. And
and as a homeowner, it's going to give me more confidence that I'm like, oh, he's going to crush what he's saying he's going to do because he's going to find somebody who to fill the holes, I guess.
What if you're in a situation where we probably have some people in the audience where you're new enough to business where you feel like every job is you're almost kind of maybe BSing your way through it. Like you're just kind of like, I think if you go back in time, everybody's in that spot somewhere where it's like, I don't have a ton of experience yet. I'm not an expert in one thing yet. And maybe, you know, where do you go from there, right? I mean, it can be tough.
Yeah. No, it's a big question. I'm trying to think of like some experiences too, like on that point of like when you feel like the lack of confidence as the contractor, like, because I think the lack of experience maybe internalizes as like, okay, well, I don't have the confidence to actually like crush this job or estimate accurately or sell the job or win the job or, you know, those kinds of things, just thinking back on my experience. And I feel like the temptation is just to like talk broadly about things and not get into the details. But I think that's where to try and level up on that side of things as early as you can, which again, you have to fail too. We've talked about that before. Like you have to have some some bruises, some black eyes to actually learn and grow.
It's inevitable.
Yeah.
It's part of learning.
And, you're probably going to lose some money on jobs that you did sell because you're learning along the way, right? Yeah. But hopefully you're learning. Yeah. That is the goal.
And maybe this is a prevailing theme to sales as well. If there is this level of honesty, it's very hard for a salesperson that's kind of wants to win a job. And it's every bone in our body is telling us, sell it.
Yeah.
But if you approach the customer and said, well, I'm really new to this, but I want to do a great job for you. And your cost to the customer is probably lower than somebody else that has a ton of experience.
Less overhead potentially.
Less overhead. Yep. It's a great point. Yep. And so the customer is going to see the value proposition. And sometimes they don't want the best guy in town to do their job. They want somebody that's just getting started.
Or available.
You're right. Exactly. You can
do
nothing
it next
on
week.
a schedule.
Great.
Yeah, right. They're like, and they feel like they can manage the quality side themselves.
That's a good point.
Yeah, and so just communicate. Like I've been doing this for 1 year.
Yep.
And we're learning as we go, but I want to do a great job for you, and you communicate that to them.
Yeah, humility.
Yeah.
So good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Next thing you know, people can take advantage of that too. And I've had that when I was new.
Right.
Though people were like, here's this guy this fool is charging way less than he's actually. He's losing money.
Right.
People can take advantage of that.
It's true. Yeah.
So as you get more experience, it's probably almost like setting some calendar type cycle of like every quarter of looking back. How good are we? What did we learn?
Right.
What are our costs?
Yeah. But it's like, to your point, setting aside the time.
Yeah.
And having the data to do it. Like when your hair's on fire, and you've got your building and you're estimating and you're doing accounting and you're doing back office. It's like, how do you become, I haven't been a contractor, but how do you become diligent? This is kind of a different topic, but how do you become diligent about assessing your processes? So like, yes, we're speaking to sales processes. Obviously, there's other business processes you should have too. But what's the cadence that maybe you should like circle back and review? How many jobs am I winning? How many jobs am I selling? Maybe speak to that from your perspective.
I was just talking to a friend last week, and he had mentioned he has a weekly meeting with his team, and they go through, he wanted regular touch points. Yep. And one of the things but he was also bringing out some pain points he had with a couple of projects where process wasn't being followed. Yeah. And he knew it. He thought, that was stupid. We should have been invoicing sooner or whatever it was. Sure. And I said, well, what if you had, as a part of your board, you had your project board, everything laid out, and you just touched base with your team on specific things and kind of made a log of it. And as you learned more to the process point that we started off with, if you don't have process, you don't learn from mistakes because you don't necessarily document them. It's so easy. Unfortunately, I've made the same mistakes more than once.
Sure. Yeah.
And you come back to you're like, that was so stupid. But if you document it, but it's probably a weekly cadence, right?
Yeah.
Of being able to say, okay, what are the things that I need to be looking at? And you have to block out at least half a day, a week of saying, okay, I'll handle all my back end stuff. Make sure my customers are billed. Make sure they pay. Make sure the expectations are set. Make sure I have work lined up for the future.
Yeah. No, that's a good point. It makes me think like say you're a solo contractor. Yeah. You're building and you're selling. Like you have to sell jobs to keep food on the table. Like you're feeling the urgency there.
Yes.
So you're like, you have to continue selling jobs, but you're like, well, I also have to complete the jobs that I'm selling from a fulfillment standpoint. So maybe even just speaking to schedule of like, hey, how do you work in sales into your weekly schedule? Like, should it be blocked off on your calendar? My gut would say yeah. But I'm like, you have lots of projects maybe moving at the same time. What's your take on that from a construction standpoint?
When I was building, I think the biggest challenge for me was trying to work around all of my customers' schedules because they are saying it's 7 p.m. they want to meet on a Monday night. And I'm like, well, that's normally when we're doing something as a family.
Yeah, hard to have boundaries.
It's really, really hard. And I think that's when I started realizing if I want to have a life outside of my business, I need to scale it to the point where I can actually delegate some of this stuff. And that was extremely painful because all of my experience was based around everything that I could do.
Yeah.
Even from a fulfillment side, I was that person that could, if something was behind, I would go to the field and make it up. And so if somebody was sick, I made up the slack for it. If something didn't happen, I'd work all night, get it done.
Classic owner.
Yeah.
Of a company, right?
I'm not bragging. I'm just saying.
But somebody has, it's your name on the line at the end of the day.
Exactly. So I'd have to, make up the slack for it. And I remember feeling the frustration of that. and also feeling like I wasn't doing a great job at all of the things that I had to do. And I think if you ever feel that moment, somebody was listening to this and being like, I just feel like I'm not doing a great job at anything. And you can. I knew that. I thought, well, I've done that before. I know I could be good at it if I had given enough time. Then something needs to change. Yeah. It's either you need to delegate something or scale it back and say, okay, well, maybe I'm growing too fast. Maybe I'm taking on too much work. Sure. And to your point on like the scheduling part about it, I mean, it's probably letting your customers know even like, well, I've got that time blocked off. We're going to be a little late on this project, unfortunately, because we had a setback. And then even the change order side of it, being like, well, if we add that on, it's going to set our job back another 6 months because I don't have the time to, I have these other commitments already.
Over-communicate.
Yeah. I remember I had one job where they just add. I mean, they started off with being a very, like, let's just put a stair in, we want to remodel the stairway. Next thing you know, we're remodeling the whole freaking house.
The whole first floor.
The kitchen's getting redone. Oh my gosh. And they're,
I'm like, okay, so in that scenario, is it like all change orders from here on out? Or are you like,
it was tough to keep up with,
right?
I mean, like I was, and then
you're still selling.
Yeah, right. You're still selling. And then the problem was they had a hard deadline of when they wanted to get into the house. And I did a horrible job of communicating that to them because they just kept adding stuff on. Can you do that? It was how it worked. Yes, we can do that. And I was thinking to myself, I want the way I would want this done in my house. I would want it to be done with excellence. I'd want it done carefully. And to them, they're thinking, yeah, they want that too, but they want it done on a budget. They want to meet the original budget and the original timeline. And I wasn't telling them, no, that's not going to work.
Yes.
And I'm picking up the slack. And one thing I've learned is nobody's ever told me thank you for working all night for their job. Nobody's ever said, wow, I want to give you a bonus because you guys just slaved away. Not once. I've never had that happen.
Yeah.
It seems like the more you put into it, the more they want out of it.
The more they expect.
Yeah. It seems like the boundaries are how you get the respect, not giving in. True. It's weird, isn't it?
Yeah. No, it's kind of like a reverse psychology thing.
Yeah.
A little bit.
Yeah. And so when I had those, on the flip side, when I would tell people, you know what, we're adding stuff on, this job is behind schedule, it's going to be another 3 months, maybe more.
They respect the process.
And then they're saying, well, yeah, I get it. I mean, it's just, we did add a lot of stuff.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a really good point. Kind of going to the systems side of things, it just made me think, like, when we're talking, like, should you build in sales time to your week or follow-up time? Like, those are the things I think of from a sales standpoint of like, well, what jobs are you waiting to hear back from? What new leads do you need to reach out to? Is there cold calling involved? Do you need to go door knocking? I mean, like, those are sales strategies to keep, like, how are you going to get more referrals? Can you ask your people for referrals? That's a lot to keep straight, even if you're just a salesperson. But as a contractor and a business owner, that's not the only thing you're focused on. Yeah. And so I think it speaks to, not to have like a plug for Congenius here necessarily. But maybe.
Why not? Let's plug away. Yeah.
But in my sales career, the only way to stay on top of everything and make sure that it hasn't been not just Congenius, but like the only way to make sure that you're on top of your follow-up, that you're on top of the jobs that you're estimating, that you're on top of like what referrals did I get? Do I need to call today? Is having like a system and a CRM for it. Yep. Like, you're never going to get by with just the notes on your phone or because fires come up. Like, as everybody knows in every industry, but construction especially, there's going to be a fire every day, of course. But it's like, if you have a system for like, okay, I have 10 minutes to do this, organization's key to doing that. So having some kind of tool that keeps you organized about, here's the things that I need to follow up on, here's where my leads are at, moving them, keeping that organized, like to the project board, to your point earlier. Yes, Congenius has it. It's not the only thing that has it, but you have to have a process for that. And there is software that can help you actually manage some of those things. And I think
when you're saying that, Kinsey, I'm thinking back to the time when I was the notepad guy, and I would, you'd have a notepad and you go out to the customer and you're taking notes down this, pad of paper, throw it in the truck. And then I had notes from, this one job. Where did those go? And then you get another pad of paper out for the next one. Next thing you know, you got notes all over the place, stuff getting lost, no prioritization to anything.
Oh, yeah.
Some stuff's written on a 2x6 somewhere, and you're just like, oh, that was important. And it'll come to you in the middle of the night, and you're like, where's that 2x4?
And then you can't sleep.
Right. No, and then you're getting stressed out about stuff, and it can snowball out of control.
Oh, easily. Yeah. And then it's like, if you're not on top of follow-up or those kinds of things, you won't win the job. Because they'll be like, oh, I'm scattered. I'm out. I'm unorganized. Yeah. Like, that's been my experience. The moments where I'm like, oh, I'm not being diligent about keeping track of who I need to reach out to, who I need to, then I'm like, well, it just doesn't happen on its own, of course. And so it's important to have a system and a way, again, congenious or no congenius, like to have a way that's not just the notes everywhere, scattered everywhere, because you're not going to close as many jobs as you can, and you're not going to appear to be on top of it from a sales standpoint, from a customer relationship standpoint, if you don't have some kind of organizational method.
Wouldn't you say, Kinsey, that a lot of people have grown to expect more systems and processes as well as a part of the 21st century technology, that a lot of people are expecting things to be done in a much more efficient way than a human being can do with just a pad of paper.
Yeah,
the communication side, for instance, I mean, it's not like you can just, it's not like you're sending people letters or things like that anymore. Like, I mean, it's instant communication.
Instant gratification.
Right. Like, where is that? I asked for it, yesterday.
Yeah.
So there's a certain element of do it in the moment. And I know we've talked about this in our business as well. If something needs to get done, we focus on making sure it just gets done then.
Yeah.
I mean, stuff gets dropped if we just say, well, I'll get that tomorrow.
Yeah.
Maybe it's a 2-minute phone call. Make that call.
Yeah.
Get it done.
It'll be over with.
Yes.
Yeah. Totally.
Yeah. But anyway, we're diving off into kind of a side
into
topic there. Project
but
management, et cetera.
But sales, like having pre-construction, it's a process. Having a system or some kind of organizational way to stay on top of what's your follow-up, what's your, because it's not going to follow up on its own, basically is my point to like tying it to sales of like, that's the only way that you keep your promises when it comes to like, oh, I said I'd have that estimate back to you this date.
Yeah.
What if you say the same date to 15 people and you're, you know what I mean, or whatever?
How many people do we know that seems like a very, I mean, I was just talking to somebody else a couple of days ago, and they had just mentioned they were requested a bid on something, got it, they got the bid back, they accepted the work, and then that person said, I'll be there on Saturday or Sunday, and at the latest. Didn't show up, and now it's 3 weeks later, and there's no communication. They paid for it, they're waiting, and this is a person they know and trust, so that they're not talking to the lawyers yet, but nonetheless, that speaks to the character of that person, and we don't want to be in that position where people are looking at us like, man, I asked Ben for that, and it's been 3 weeks, and he said he'd have it a week ago. Why set that expectation? And this ties right in another question for you, Kinsey, on the setting the negative expectations, even from or maybe not negative expectations so much as enforcing the negative aspects of sales. Like sometimes we don't want to go there. We don't want to tell people it's going to cost more money than you've got, or, we want to win a job. We want to sell something, particularly if somebody's a commissioned salesperson, you don't want to bring up the stuff that's uncomfortable. I mean, talk to me about that.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that, oh man. Yeah. When you're selling jobs, like if I'm understanding your question correctly, just even upfront, like almost having like there's a term in sales, like an upfront contract, a little bit of like getting all of the things that you don't want to talk about, budget, timelines, those kinds of things like on the table before you even like dive into furthering a conversation as part of like qualifying the job.
Yep. Get the no quickly if it's going to be a no.
Yeah. And so like giving permission to the customer to tell you if anything feels off as part of talking to them about an estimate or winning a job, I think is like one of the best ways to save you time when it comes to selling jobs. So speaking to like, most of my customers fall within this budget and this budget for a kitchen remodel because of this certain standard, those kinds of things. Like it's going to scare off people that are not in that budget frame, which again, we've talked about, you don't want to win every job, right? That's not, go back to that podcast and listen to it. It's important to know that and to know your worth in that. But I think that giving them the permission to like call out when they hear BS, like even up front, like, hey, if you feel like any of this is off as part of the process, you're the homeowner. If you feel like this process is off, if you feel like there's, confusion anywhere, or if you feel like it's just like this partnership isn't going to make sense, tell me that. Like I'm giving you permission to tell me no, so that you're not chasing people around who are like already decided it's a no months ago. I don't know if I answered your question with that.
No, that's good. I know I like that a lot. Yeah, one of my mentors, he would always come into jobs with the first. His first goal was to scare the customer off. He would always tell me that he would go into a project and say, yeah, you want your house built? It's going to cost you this, it's going to cost you $500,000 to build something he can do for $400,000. Because he realized if they said, oh, forget it, right off, he's just like, well, okay, next. He's a high-end quality builder. And if somebody's looking for a deal, he wants to weed that right out.
Yeah.
If their reaction first off is like, well, that's kind of a little on the high side, but let's continue the conversation. He realizes, well,
we can explore further.
Yeah. And then if they're saying, well, are there ways of, cutting that back? Somebody said, well, there is, there are
right.
ways of cutting it back, but nonetheless, you want to make sure that you address that stuff. And I like it. Like you said, get it in early, make sure that if somebody's telling you, all of those red flags get really addressed very quickly in the process. Where, I remember one person telling me, I want it done cheap. I want it done fast. And I'm thinking, thanks for telling me, because that's not us.
Yeah, I'm not your guy.
Yeah, cheap and fast. No, that's not. We don't do that one.
Yeah. But some would have the temptation of like, oh, I have to close the job.
Yeah.
So, like, what do you do? Yeah. Like, in that scenario?
Well, I think that might come back to us saying, well, here's why we're not the cheapest, because of these factors.
Show your value.
Yeah, right.
Educate.
Educate.
Yeah.
I like that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's so good.
Yeah.
So good.
This is a fun topic.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's so many more, like, conversations and nugget, and we're not getting into, like, sales tactics either.
Right.
Like, always be
The
closing and, like, Sandler
Yeah.
sales. And, like, I mean, there's so many kinds of sales training things that you can do to level up in some of these things and learn from. But I think in terms of, like, just overarching sales, you have to prioritize it to keep your business afloat.
Yeah.
There's no business out there that makes it if they don't have sales coming in, if they don't have revenue coming in. And so it's like, and I think one point too is like, if you get to the point where you want to scale and you're not the sales guy, find him or her. Find the person who can be that arm, partner with somebody. Maybe a partnership makes sense. And then you can, do more, you can sell more, you can fulfill more. Like I think those are things to where like just assessing, and again, back to humility, being like, oh, I'm terrible at sales, I'm never going to like win jobs. Then you're only relying on referrals, which most people in the space do, which is great. And you should be getting lots of referrals and you should be asking for referrals. But there comes a time, especially when markets become a little bit more tight, and people there's not as many jobs to go around, where like you have to know how to sell to be able to still win some jobs in a tightened market.
And one thing that's helped people that I've talked to that are not naturally sales trained or sales driven, they don't have that mindset of sales, is back to that process. And to your point, the humility to go to somebody as either a partnership or an employee, but maybe that's a mentor.
Sure.
Maybe that's somebody who's really great at it, and approaching that person and saying, can you help refine my sales process? Maybe have an hour and look at what I'm doing now and what can I do to improve. And you'd be surprised how many times people will say, yeah, I'd be happy to take a look at what you're doing now. Even that could even be a competitor.
So true.
It's amazing how people will give you their wisdom when you ask for it.
People want to help people. Yeah.
I mean,
I feel that truly, like people, want to actually help others if they're asked.
I mean, there are a few people that don't, but I mean,
maybe don't talk to them.
Yeah. Every once in a while, I come across, well, that, you lose some faith in a few human beings.
That's true. That's fair. I can't.
But there are a lot. I mean, but far and large, the number of people that will actually respond positively to that request is amazing.
Totally.
I've always been surprised, and being able to sometimes realize that's not about paying them for it. I mean, there's some of the best advice I've gotten from people is the best payment I could give them back is a thank you.
Yeah,
and just say, you've helped me.
Yeah,
I remember telling that to one guy. He was a mentor and didn't know it. He was just really good at some things, and sales being one of them.
Yeah,
and just maybe you've helped me level up as a business, and he didn't know that. He said, "How so?"
Cool.
Like, I mean, he was genuinely flattered and appreciative, but really, and he kept it coming. Like, I mean, he just, he was that wealth of information. The other just thing that I want to just tack onto there, which I discovered with any type you're getting advice from somebody, they will have wrong advice. They will have things that work for them that don't work for you.
Sure.
And don't cut them off.
Yeah.
Just, I mean, they might be an amazing salesperson and an absolutely abysmal project manager.
Yeah, chew the meat, spit out the bones. That's what I've heard with some of that stuff.
You're right.
Yeah.
So I think that's really, I mean, probably I've made the mistake of, well, that person doesn't know what they're doing because in one area they didn't.
Yeah.
But maybe they're just a genius in another spot.
Yeah. I think to kind of like summarize though, like and a lot of what we talk about is like you have to have a learner and a humility mindset to be great at anything, right? So like you can be great at anything. Any contractor can be great at every certain aspect of their job. I believe that for everyone. If they become a student, seek to learn, and like learn from mistakes. Like that's part of it. And then ask, like to your point, ask mentors, learn from people. And then they have the humility and the mindset of like, I know that I still have room to grow. That's the biggest thing, I think, in learning anything and becoming an expert at anything. Like knowing I don't have it all together. I've got a long way to go. Like those are the best people in business, in construction, and like that are driven to be better. Better people, better humans, better contractors, better whatever. I'm inspired by those people because they're going to take their business like super far, further than further than someone who's like, oh, I got it all together. I'm great at everything. Like, no, you're really not. Good. Nobody's great at everything. Yeah. Like, so check yourself. I love it. A little bit.
It's really, really good.
Anyways, probably more on sales at some point. We'll dive into more details, but
this has been fun, Kinsey, and that was a great summary of things. And we're learning as we go.
Yeah.
We're in the same boat. And I think nobody's a master.
It's true.
To the point where they can't learn something new.
Yep. But learn it. Level it up. Yeah. And don't be afraid of failure. If somebody, I think that's one of the other things. When we are new, sometimes we want to get it all figured out ahead of time. And I think you talked about earlier of just sometimes you get knocked around a little bit, and that's part of the journey. Yeah. I've been knocked around. Yeah. You have to start at some point.
Yes.
You can't just be like preparing and never actually get out there and try.
Oh, so true. So, yeah. All right, folks. That's the wrap for this episode. Thanks, Kinsey.
Have a good one.
Thanks.